Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast with yours truly, Bill, the company's expert. And today we're going to be talking about how to answer a specific job interview question, which is, what are your salary expectations? I'm going to talk about how to answer this question in an interview. I'm also going to talk about how to answer this question on a job application, which is a totally different thing. It's a completely different thing the way you would answer this in an interview, as opposed to if you're filling in a field on a job application and you can't say whatever you want, you just have to enter a number. And we're also going to get into a little bit of how you do salary negotiation, because this is a very big topic. And in order to understand how this stuff works, you have to sort of talk about all these things at once. Okay, so we're going to get into that today. And also we're going to answer a question from a viewer who sent in a question asking about how to get promoted in your job. So we're going to address that too today. So stay tuned. Okay, so today we're going to address the question of how to answer what are your salary expectations? So you're in a job interview and you get asked this question, and a lot of people kind of freeze up because this question is asking about something relatively personal and confidential. After all, you don't go around advertising how much money you make. Some people like to keep that very close to their chest. They don't disclose this publicly. And so getting asked a question like that can throw a lot of people because maybe they're not prepared for it. And maybe they find the question a little too personal and they don't feel comfortable asking it. Okay, now, the first thing you got to know about this question, okay, is that when they ask you this question is very important, because when they ask you the question determines how you're going to answer. If they've just met you and they don't really know you, and maybe this is your first interaction with, say, the recruiter or hiring manager, and they ask you almost immediately right out of the gate, they say, well, what are your salary expectations? That is basically a tool to eliminate you, because the only thing they're really checking for is to see if you want a prohibitively large amount of compensation. And if the answer is yes, then they just eliminate you right on the spot. That is the sole purpose of this question if they ask you at a very early stage. Okay, that's the first thing everybody needs to understand. Now, if they were actually interested in finding out how much money they would need to pay you for you to feel good about your job, like your new job, and get you to accept the job and get you to be retained. You want to stay in the job and you're not just going to quit in a month, at the first sign of the job not being all smiles and chuckles. You get disgruntled very easily because you're not making enough money. Okay. If they really did care about having a serious conversation with you about how much money you need, that does not occur in your first job interview. In fact, the only time that will occur will be after they've presented you with an offer letter. Okay. So if they ask you this question at any time before they've presented you with an offer, the entire purpose they're asking is so that they can eliminate you if you're asking for too much money. Okay? So everybody needs to understand that. Okay? That's a key in understanding how you would respond to this question. Okay? Now, I guess one more principle before I can give you an answer. The other thing that you have to be aware of is that a very good strategy to have when going through a job interview or the hiring process in general is that the goal of each stage of the process for you is to get to the next stage of the process. Okay. So for example, let's say you're sending in a job application. Okay. You're right at the beginning of the hiring process. You shouldn't be thinking about the very end when they give you an offer letter and what the terms are going to be and what you will accept. Instead, your sole focus should go towards getting to the next stage. So if you're sending in your application, your focus should be getting an interview. And when you're at your first job interview, your focus should be getting a second interview or getting an offer, whichever is the next stage. Okay. So that's a winning strategy. Okay. Now, if you're in a job interview and they ask you the question, what are your salary expectations? Keeping in mind the reasoning why they're asking this. Okay. The first thing you have to understand is that you should never give a number. Okay. There's many problems with giving an actual number. You should try to avoid giving an actual number. Okay. Now, a good way of doing this, okay, is for you to say right immediately when they ask you this question, what are your salary expectations? You would respond with, well, I would really need to know more about the job to be able to answer that properly. Now, for a lot of people, this is going to be accurate because let's pretend that they've posted a job. You've responded to the job posting, but the job posting is a little bit vague. You don't know exactly what the working conditions are like. You don't know if there's shift work involved. You don't know if there's going to be, dealing with undesirable situations, say disgruntled customers, or dealing with, very dirty jobs, or, what exactly the deal is. You don't know if you're going to be required to work holidays or, things like this. So, and you don't know the nature of the job either. You don't know the hours. You don't know the conditions. I mean, it's very vague. Okay. So if you get to the job interview and before you really have a chance to understand exactly what the job involves, they're already asking you how much money you need. It's probably accurate to say that, well, I would have to know more. I'd have to know some of these details before I could really give you an accurate answer. Okay, so this is certainly not deceptive. In a lot of cases, accurate. Now, a lot of times, the recruiter or hiring manager, the interviewer that you're dealing with, may just say, okay, and then move on to the next question. But a lot of times they won't. They'll say, well, you need to give us some idea of how much money you need, even though they haven't told you much about the job, right? It's a very reasonable situation. It's a little game they're playing. It's a dance. Okay. Now, I recommend that the second response you give, like your comeback to that, is you flip the question around to them. So you would say, well, I mean, this is an approved job posting. People, higher ups in the organization have approved this job. It's been posted publicly. So I'm assuming, therefore, that the salary range or the compensation for this job was also approved. Can you tell me what it is? And then if they say, oh yeah, well, the range is between this and this, and you say, okay, well, that would work fine for me. Okay. So that would be the second stage answer. So the first stage is, well, I would need to know more details before I can say. And if they don't accept that, the second stage is, well, you flip the question around. Well, this is an approved position, so the salary must be approved. Can you tell me what the range is for this position? Okay, you turn it around on them. Now, a lot of times they'll tell you the range, and then you just say, okay, well, that would be great. That range fits in with what I'm looking for. You see, you're not giving a number; you're just agreeing to the range. So great. And if that's where the question ends, that's where the question ends, and you pass. Because you haven't stated requirements that are way outside of what they're able to pay, able or willing to pay. But a lot of times, as you can imagine, they won't fall into that trap. They won't play along. They'll say, oh, well, even though I'm recruiting for this job, I don't know what the range is. They haven't told me, right? Sure, everyone believes that, right? But okay, so they're not playing ball. They're not giving you a range. They want you to give a number first. Okay, in that case, you move on to the third stage of how you would respond to this question, which is for you to give a wide range. A very low number to a very high number. Both numbers would be within reason, but they're very low to very high. So you could say, well, for this, say it's a middle management job, you'd say, well, I don't know, anything between 70,000 to 150,000, depending on the details. For all I know, I might be required to relocate. I don't really know anything about this job yet. So it would be somewhere within that range. And that's as specific as I can get at this point. So that's the 3-stage answer that you would give in a job interview if they ask you this question. Okay? Now, the advantage of giving a wide range is that they can't eliminate you because you demanded too much money, because the range that you said you would accept starts at a low number. Okay? However, you're not locking yourself into a low number. You're saying the range that I would accept goes from this number all the way up to this number. So if you get to the final stage and they give you an offer letter, you then can reasonably say, I would need a little bit more money than this if they offer you a low number. And you're not going back on your word because you're true to your word. You're saying, well, my range could be anywhere between here to here, depending on details. And now that you know more details, I would need this much, and it would be within your range. It leaves you open to asking for more money at a final stage. Okay? Never give a number. Give a range. Very low to very high. Okay, and both of those numbers would be reasonable for the job that you're applying for, but they would be on the very low side to the very high side. So that's how you would answer this in an interview. Now, when I say this, a lot of people immediately come back with a question. They say, well, look, I get asked that question when I fill out a job application. Okay, and when I'm filling in a job application online, they give me a field, and the only way to pass, that field and submit the application is I have to enter a number. So I can't use your advice. Your advice is no good on an application. I say yes, because I've given you the answer for a job interview. Okay, now let's talk about how you would fill this in an application. Okay. So if you're filling in a job application and they ask you, what are your salary expectations? And they make it a mandatory field where you have to enter a number, okay? And you can only put one number, you can't put a range, and you can't leave it blank, okay? You have the same problem that we talked about in the interview. You really don't know the details of the job. So it seems kind of silly for them to demand that you choose a number and stick to it of the money that they would you would need. Okay, so to answer this and figure out what we put there, you have to go back to the premise that the purpose of every stage of the job search process is for you to get to the next stage. Okay, and the next stage after the application is getting an interview. Okay, you don't want to be eliminated. You want to get an interview. So you got to focus on that. Now, once again, the sole purpose that they're asking you this question on a job application is because if your number that you put is too high, they will immediately eliminate you from the running based on the fact that your number was too high. Okay, that's the only reason they're asking you this question. They're not asking it to get a true understanding of how much money you would need. They're just asking it so they can eliminate you based on you want too much money. Okay? So, based on that, here's how I would advise that you answer the question on an application. Think about all the details of the job, okay? You don't know most of the important details about this job you're applying for, okay? So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to imagine that all those details, things that you don't know, they were perfect. They were all to your liking, okay? So if you don't know if it's shift work, just assume it isn't. And if you don't know if you get holidays off, just assume you do. Every single holiday, every single religious holiday, no matter how ridiculous, you get them all off, okay? Just assume that. And you don't know the working hours, you don't know when you have to show up and when you have to go home. Just assume that they're the best you could imagine, okay? 6-hour days, banker's hours, right? You don't know what the commute's like. You don't know how strict they are about, starting time, ending time. You don't know about the working conditions. You don't know anything. Well, assume that every single one of those details is the way you would want them to be. And then ask yourself, how much money would you need to do that job? Okay, because they're not giving you any of these details. So If they're not going to tell you, you're free to assume they're whatever you want. So give an honest number, and that number will probably be very low. Okay? Until you know different, you could assume that all these things are perfect. And write in that low number, the lowest amount of money you would ever accept for this job where everything is perfect the way you want. The people are wonderful. Your boss is awesome and inspiring. Okay? Write in that number. Now, what this does is it allows you to give an honest answer, but it gives you the highest chance of not being eliminated from the application. Now, if they do call you in for an interview and they decide to give you more details about the position, then maybe you might revise your number now that you've been given new information. But you're going on the best information you have available at the time when you fill in your application. So that's how I'd recommend that you answer this question on a job application. Okay? Now, once I say this to people immediately come back with the question, well, that doesn't make sense for me because I don't want to work for an extremely low amount of money. I want to work for I want a living wage. I want the amount that I'm worth. Okay, so that advice does me no good. Wouldn't it be better if I was eliminated in the job application stage and I don't waste my time doing interviews and getting offers when at the end of the day, they're going to offer me so little money that it doesn't make sense for me to take the job? And I say, yes, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It doesn't make any sense for you to take a job where you're not getting paid what you're worth or what makes sense. But here's what you got to understand. Okay? The way salary works, the way the negotiation process works, is that if you want more money, they're not going to give you more money for free. You have to have bargaining power. Okay. Now think about this for a second. Think about how your behavior when you go shopping. Okay. Now, let's say you need to buy something and you go to a store and there's an option. Let's say you need to buy a car. Okay. I got to get a new car. Okay. It's not something you do every day, but pretend that it is. And you go to the car dealership and you talk to the salesperson and you say, I need a car. And the salesperson says, okay, well, I got one over here. It's $40,000. Now, you know nothing about the car. You have no attachment to the car. And the only thing you know about it is that it's $40,000. You might come back and say, well, nah, it's too expensive. I mean, I know you can get a car for cheaper than that. Right? So no. I want something like $15,000 or less. Right? Now, this is the problem. When you know nothing about the car, you have no attachment to it, you have no idea what its strengths are, what its selling points are, or how good it could be. You never know. You might fall in love with this car. There are people in this world who buy cars for $500,000. Okay? And to them, the car is worth that much. They get that much value out of it because they bought it. But the problem is in this situation is that the only thing you know about this car is a price. So your natural tendency will be to demand a reduction in the price. Okay? Now, maybe later you go and find out that this car that the salesman was going to suggest to you was actually a secondhand Ferrari that's worth about $100,000. But you didn't know this at the time. This car was a winner. This car was highly desirable. You could get a Ferrari for $40,000. Right? Okay. Now that you know this, and assuming you know what a Ferrari is and you know the value of a Ferrari, this would be an incredible deal, right? And someone says, I can give it to you for $40,000. You say, yes, done. Let's do it. Right? That's a pretty good price. So that's what the job interview process is like. Okay. In the very beginning, in the first round of interviews, they don't know you. They have no idea. You could be the best employee they will ever have in their organization. Okay. For all they know. Okay. But they would have no way of knowing this. Okay. They've just met you and already they're asking, how much money do you need? I don't know you. I don't know what you're capable of. I don't know what you're like to work with. I don't know how hard of a worker you are, but how much money would you need? And then their instant response will be, well, it's too high, right? The way to do this is to get through the job interview process till you get to the final stage where they offer you, they give you an offer letter. Okay, they've fallen in love with you. They've seen how awesome you are to deal with as a person. They've seen how much experience you have. They've seen how you can ace all these job interview questions. They've seen your incredible education and all your qualities, your communication skills, your collaboration skills, your understanding of protocol and public relations. They've seen your value, and they've pursued you as the front runner in this recruitment and selection process for this position. And they get to the final stage, everybody thinking that, you're the one, and they offer you the job offer. They give you the offer letter. And right then you say, you know what? The job's good. The conditions are good. The vacation is fine. The schedule is fine. The working conditions are okay. They're a little bit not as good as what I'm used to, but you know what? I'll tell you what, if you just bump up the salary to this, I can start whenever you want. Okay. At that point, you have bargaining power. Because not only have they fallen in love with you and they really want you, they feel that you're worth the money. But if you were to back out now, they'd be disappointed. They would feel pain. They either have to start from scratch and find, another candidate, or they have to go with their number two, which they're less excited about. Okay? So that would be when you bump up the salary. Okay, you wait till you get that offer letter. Anytime before you're given an offer letter, you do not negotiate. Remember, the purpose of every step of the process is to get to the next step of the process. Okay? So that's how that works. Okay, now, as you can probably tell, this topic, it's a big topic. There's a lot of concepts here. There's a lot of principles here that all sort of come into play that determine how you answer these questions. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so that's how you answer what are your salary expectations when they ask you this question in an interview and in a job application. And it takes care of, I don't want to accept a minimal amount of money. It has to be worth what I'm worth. Okay. Now, one final thing I'll say about this, because I just want to cover one more principle that's sort of working its way through all of this, which is that people, a common thing that people ask is they say, well, there are websites out there. I can enter in my location. I can enter in my occupation or my profession, my role, and it will give me a salary range. It'll say look, if you have this job and you're in this region, here's the salary range that's typical. Here's the median. Here's the, the maximum, the minimum for 80% of people out there. Okay. So I know my worth. Surely I should be able to just tell the company that, I'm worth this range. This is my position. This is my experience. This is my location. And they will know that that's the range, and they will obviously offer that to me. And I would say, well, not necessarily. Now, in a lot of cases, if you're working in a good company, they may do that. Okay. They may be self-aware, and they understand that, okay, in order to get good people, we would have to pay market price. Okay. Or if we're a particularly good company, we would be above the market, which means that we pay more than market price. But that's not always the case. There are a lot of companies out there that pay below market price. Market price simply means the average, right? That means half the companies pay more than that and half the companies pay less than that. Okay, so you might be dealing with a company that pays below market. That means they pay less than market price. And there's a variety of reasons for this. Some of them that make sense, some of them that don't make sense. Okay. But a lot of people kind of believe that all I have to do is I have to state what I'm worth in the sense that I tell them what these websites tell me I'm worth, and they'll pay it. Not so much. In a perfect world, that would happen. But as a lot of people out there who have experience going through the recruitment and selection process for different jobs, you guys know that that's not always the case. A lot of times it isn't the case. And there's a final principle here, and that is that, how can I put this? Coming back to your behavior when you go to the store, okay? Let's say you need to buy something. You need to buy a bottle of everybody's favorite drink, sugar-free Diet Pepsi, okay? Everyone listening to this podcast, you know that's your favorite drink. And you know that when you go to the store, you need to buy a 2-liter of it. Okay, if you're in Canada. If you're in the States, you have, I don't know how many gallons or pecks or whatever measurement they use down there. But you need to buy a bottle of Diet Pepsi. So yes, you are a Diet Pepsi addict, so you could pay up to $10 for this bottle of Diet Pepsi. But do you immediately go to the store and talk to the manager and say, give me a bottle of Diet Pepsi, here's $10? No, you don't. Usually the price will be lower than that. Usually they'll be selling it this week for $3 a bottle, right? And maybe you decide that, you know what, $3, I know it goes down to $2 sometimes, so I'll come back when it's $2 a bottle, right? Just because you can afford $10 and you'd be willing to pay it if necessary, doesn't mean that that's what you're going to offer. Right? That is consumer behavior. And this is exactly the behavior that companies have when they're hiring employees. Okay? They could pay up to $100,000 for this person, but the first thing they're going to try and do is they're not going to offer $100,000 off the bat. That's only the high point of their range. They're going to see if they can get that person for 50. Because if they offer 50 and the candidate accepts with open arms and a big smile on their face, they think bonus. That's great. I got them for cheap. Okay? So even if you know that you're worth, say, $90,000 and you suspect the company is aware that you're worth $90,000, they may still come back to you with an offer for 50. And it's not some kind of statement about how much you're worth or how much you're worth to them. It's simply an attempt to save money, to reduce their labor cost. And that's only their first offer. And if you accept it, they're laughing. They're happy. They could have gone as high as 100, but they got you for 50, right? So that's the other force at play here, okay? So you got to be aware of this. So even though you know you're worth 90 and they know you're worth 90, they're still going to try and offer you 50 because you never know. You might accept it, right? Or they might be able to get you for that much. Okay, so that also is a concept that's playing through everything we've talked about, okay? There's making the assumption that they're going to offer you what you're worth, quote unquote, and making the assumption that what you think you're worth is accurate in a flexible marketplace where year to year, market price changes and the economy shifts. And, some years there's an oversupply of labor and some years there's an undersupply of labor for various skills. Okay. Just assuming that they will offer you what you're worth is false. They might be able to pay what you're worth, but they may not offer you that. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. That's the answer to this. It only took me half an hour to explain, so hopefully everybody is on board with that. If you do have any questions about this particular question, this issue of salary expectations in the job search process or the job application process, please leave them in the comments of this video. And if I can answer in writing, I will. If it's a longer answer, I may repeat your question and answer it in the podcast. And that's what we're going to do right now. I received a question from a viewer, a pretty awesome viewer called Mighty Owl. And Mighty Owl asks, "Hi, Bill. Could you please make a video about annual performance review and how to get promoted, etc.?" Well, I certainly can, Mighty Owl. I'll tell you what, I'm going to talk about how to get promoted, because you kind of asked also about annual performance reviews, and annual performance reviews can get complicated. It's mainly to do with politics and mainly to do with organizational culture. It's really not super duper based on actual performance. And it's a well-known fact that performance reviews do not work. This is actually management science. We've known for many, many years that like at least 70 years, we've known that annual performance reviews, it's very dubious whether they work or not. And in fact, most data suggests that A, they don't work, and B, they do more harm than good. And the only reason that in a lot of organizations they still do these is because they have nothing to replace it with. This is yet another example of how far the HR world has to go in being effective. Okay, this is an area that they're particularly poor in, doing performance reviews. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about performance reviews. However, your other question, Mighty Owl, about how to get promoted, let's talk about that. Okay, now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, because the nature of this is I have to sort of give a one-size-fits-all answer. And obviously, how to get promoted, that's going to vary by what position you're in, what industry you're in, what country you're in, what corporate culture you're in, and a variety of other factors too. So let's talk about things that you can do that will increase your chances of getting promoted. And these are pretty universal, okay? The first thing I'd like to put forward, and probably one of the most important, is simply to be likable. Being likable is a skill that you can learn like any other skill. And I've done a video on this on my regular channel, The Company's Expert. But many people have done videos on this. There's a lot of information on how to do this, how to be charismatic, how to be likable. There's some very simple principles that anybody can do, whether you're young, you're old, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. You can apply these and people will find you more likable. They will want to deal with you more often. They will enjoy interacting with you. And, so that's something that you should research, okay? You should take literally 15 minutes to learn how to do this. Okay. Being likable will help get you promoted. It's probably the single most important thing that will get you promoted. Okay. So look into that. The second thing that can help you, okay, is public speaking skills. The ability to get up in front of a group and be able to speak and not be nervous and communicate effectively, and being able to do this off the cuff, so you don't have a speech prepared. This is just something you get up extemporaneously, you just start talking, and it's coherent, it makes sense, people get on board with you, they are engaged, and you feel good doing it. Okay, public speaking skills. Now, there's many things you can do to work on this. You can join an organization that practices public speaking. I think the biggest one that I'm aware of is Toastmasters International. So you could choose to join them if that's what you want to do. If you have real issues doing this, and this is a source of almost like a phobia for you, I'd recommend that organization. Check it out, Toastmasters International. I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but they're all over the world, and they have some strengths, so it's something you might want to consider. But the bottom line is that practice makes perfect. Okay, the more you do public speaking, the more comfortable you will be at it, and the better you will be at it. Okay, now invest in yourself. Okay, if you want to be promoted, if you want to have a career and climb the ladder and move on to better and better opportunities, okay, being likable is good, and having public speaking skills is good also. Okay, so I recommend you check that out. The third thing, this comes with, I think, at least in my case, this came with maturity, and it does for a lot of people. And that is to recognize that people value harmony in the workplace. Okay, so in most jobs, there's going to be some conflict. You're going to have conflict with your boss. You're going to have conflict with your coworkers. You're going to have differing opinions on how to do things and the nature of what the work you should do. And, practically everything. You're going to have differing points of view and opinions on everything. Okay. And you're going to want to push back. Someone says, I need you to do this. And you think it's the most idiotic thing you've ever heard. And you say, well, no, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to do that. Right? I want to do this other thing. Why can't you let me do it this way? That would make so much more sense. Right? So you're going to push back. Okay. In pretty much every single job on the planet, you're going to find this, right? Now, it's important to recognize, first of all, when you push back, there is an appropriate way to do it. Okay. But after you push back a certain amount and it's not going anywhere, you're not changing anyone's mind. They're not siding with you. They're not relinquishing their, or abandoning their request or their ideas. Okay, you've got to understand that at the end of the day, especially if this is you're pushing back towards your boss, okay, that at the end of the day, after you've stated your objections, okay, and you've possibly recommended an alternative course of action, if people aren't coming with you on it, there's a time and place for you to abandon your pushback and just give in. Okay? Because if you continue to push back, it will be bad for you. You will be labeled as a malcontent. You'll be labeled as someone who is hard to deal with, hard to work with, labeled as somebody who has an attitude problem. Okay, and that will have consequences for you. Okay, people are not going to want to promote you if you're constantly giving them an argument about everything, and as a result being unpleasant to deal with. Okay, so harmony is valued, and you need to recognize this. Because at the end of the day, if you're pushing back against a boss, ultimately your boss is responsible. So if they tell you to do something a certain way and you say, well, no, I recommend instead I do it this other way, and they say, no, I want you to do it my way. If they're your boss, at the end of the day, they're responsible. If you go ahead and do it their way and it totally doesn't work, it's on them. And there's nothing you can do about it. As a subordinate, you're not in charge. And that's the reality. Okay. That's the price we pay as workers, right? And that's the responsibility that managers have. Okay. They might get paid the big bucks, but they're in charge. And if anything goes wrong, ultimately it's them that has to answer for it because they were in charge. Okay. So harmony is valued. Recognizing that will allow you to go far. Okay. Communication skills. That's important too. So we've got likability, we've got public speaking skills, we've got recognizing that harmony in the workplace is important. And number 4, we got communication skills. Okay. Knowing how to bring up bad news is very important. If you can give negative feedback or you can report bad news and you can do it in a professional way and an appropriate way, a way that people will still want to deal with you and still like you, that's very important. Okay. Things like ask, don't tell. Instead of saying this doesn't work, you can say, well, if we do this and we encounter this problem, then what do we do? Right. And let them answer that. Okay. There's other techniques too. Things like the sandwich method. And I'm not talking about the thing that everybody thinks of. I'm talking about how to do it properly. I've done a video on that. But communication skills are very important. If you can work on your communication skills, that will convince people that you are wasted in your current job and you should be managing people. Okay. Managing people is all about communication skills. And a lot of people don't have communication skills. They don't have very good communication skills. So if you have them, you stand head and shoulders above the rest. Negotiation skills. Okay. Very important. Now, negotiation is not persuasion. It's not sales. A lot of people don't realize that. Negotiation is all about having options. Okay. Ultimately, I'm going to try and convince you that you should do this. But at the end of the day, you can do what you want. You can refuse to listen to me. You can refuse to play ball with me. You can demand I pay a higher price than what I'm prepared. And the only recourse against that is if you're going to be unreasonable, it's for me to have alternatives. So I don't have to deal with you. I know going into this that if you're asking for more than $100 for this particular thing, I know I can get it for less than $100 across the street. So you don't want to listen to me. You don't want to be reasonable. You don't want to bring the price down below $100. Fine. I'll go and get it from the place across the street. I have that option because I've managed to get myself alternatives and I'm no longer dependent on you. And I know my position. That's what negotiation is all about. Okay, now having said that, sales skills are important. Maybe you don't work in sales. Maybe you're an introvert. Maybe you work, in a technical type position. You have nothing to do with business or sales. But I'll tell you something. A technical person that has sales skills, they go far. Okay, so adding sales skills to your abilities, no matter who you are, that's of value. Trust me on this. Okay. If you want to be a manager, you want to be some kind of leader. One thing you need to be as a leader is, in the world of business anyway, is having some form of sales skills. Because at some point, you will need to persuade people. You will need to get them to behave in the way that you want them to behave. And knowing how to do that is extremely powerful. If you don't have that ability, that really curtails your potential. And these are really not that hard to learn. And you can learn them in a relatively short amount of time. So I recommend that you do that. Sales skills, very important. Watch videos, read books. It's really not that hard. Just understand the concepts. Okay. So I don't know what number we're at. We're 6 or something like that. So 7, I guess, would be knowing protocol and manners. Okay. Knowing how to conduct yourself professionally. So, how you meet people, how to address people, how to interact with people. Very important. People deal with you and you do everything right and you do everything professionally. Very powerful. Once again, very simple to learn, basic skills that can be learned. It just takes a desire to learn them. Okay. Especially in the world where we are now, where as a very general trend, we're moving away from a lot of people understanding protocol and a lot of people having good manners. So when you find someone that has that and they understand that stuff, that stands head and shoulders above a lot of others. Okay. So very important. And an extension of that is professionalism, understanding how to be professional. And I mean that in more of a sense of, the window dressing, like your attire, how you dress. Okay. Understanding the process for how to deal with people. Like, for example, let's say you have a conflict at work, knowing how to address that with a person is very important. A characteristic of a lot of young people that don't have a lot of experience with career jobs is if they have a problem with someone, they're too kind of afraid to confront the person and address it directly. They will go behind their back to the boss and tell the boss. It's like, going behind the classmates back and telling the teacher on them, right? That's not the professional way of dealing with them. You can do that, but do you think that person will ever want to work with you again or trust you for that matter? No. And if every time you have a disagreement with somebody, you burn those bridges, that's bad. So being able to act professionally, being able to go and talk to people in a professional way, that's not confrontational, that's not stressful, that's very friendly, very polite, but yet addresses the issues. That's very powerful. Okay, so knowing that stuff is very important. Just having a general understanding of people, okay, that will take you far. I think that alone, just like being likable, that will achieve some incredible things in your future if you can do that. If you have an understanding of people, how they behave, what they like, what they don't like. Okay. And trying to behave in a way that people want to deal with you. They want to interact with you. That will open doors for you. That'll open doors for you despite perhaps deficiencies in technical skills sometimes, or in other areas. Despite your age, despite any other disadvantage you might have. Okay, that can really compensate for it. And finally, what I would say to answer this question of how to get promoted, what are some of the things that will help me be more promotable and open doors for me and allow me to climb the ladder quickly and and all of this is simply to tack on some general business skills. Okay. If you're going to work in business, knowing a little bit of business helps. Okay. Now let's pretend that you have technical skills. Okay. You're not interested in business. You know, you're a tradesperson. You do, I don't know, you're one of the skill trades, or you're an accountant, or you're an engineer or an architect or a medical doctor, you know, or not so lofty, you know, you're maybe an orderly or a nurse, or you're a warehouse employee, or you're an inside salesperson. You know, whatever your profession is, whatever your occupation is, having an understanding of business will help you, because the work you do is one tiny cog in a large machine that does business. So if you want to get promoted and you want to be given more authority and more decision-making abilities within that machine that ultimately does business, understanding business is pretty damn important, and that will open doors for you. Okay. A lot of times you might be a capable person. You might be charismatic, likable, but the thing that stands in your way is that they want to promote you to manager, but part of the manager job is, say, managing people or managing money, and you might not have one or more of those pieces. You know, maybe you could do everything well except the managing money part. If you're responsible for a budget, they might be a little concerned about your decision-making abilities when it comes to allocating a budget or allocating funds. You know, something like that. And it would be a terrible shame to miss out that promotion because you don't have that tiny little piece of the puzzle. Okay, so this is stuff you can learn in your spare time. It really doesn't take a big commitment. You know, and I hadn't actually made this connection until now, but that's a nice segue into my $100 MBA course that I have coming out at the end of this month. So if that interests you, I take you right through the world of business and right through an MBA program for $100. I recommend all the best university textbooks that they use in universities to teach MBAs, Masters of Business Administration. And I guide you through the whole thing, and I give you a book list to order the books for cheap. And I guide you through it. And even if it takes you a year to read these books, if you want to really get into it deep, you know, it's very cost effective. So that's what I would say to answer this question. Those are some general skills and general things that you can tack on to your existing abilities that will make you highly promotable. They will not only do that, but they will open up opportunities for you. People can offer you things that you never would have gotten before if you have these. So just to summarize, I listed roughly 10 things. Being likable, having public speaking skills, understanding the importance of harmony in the workplace and supporting it, great communication skills, the most important of which being the ability to communicate bad news and deal with negative issues in a professional, positive way in which people still want to deal with you and they still like you. Negotiation skills, sales skills, understanding protocol and having good manners, being professional in the way you look and the way you behave, having a deep understanding of people, what they like, what they don't like, how to deal with them, and finally, having some general business skills. You learn those, even if it takes you a year, even if it takes you 2 or 3 years, even if it takes 3 years, it will help you for the rest of your life. You'll see a dramatic difference in your career if you have those. So that's what I would say. Thank you once again to Mighty Owl for sending in that question. Mighty Owl, you're awesome. And if anyone else has any questions about this or anything else, please leave them in the comments of this video. Thank you very much for listening. You guys are awesome. If you want to go deeper, I have a course called Get Hired, and that will take you through everything you need to know to get hired. And if you're interested in learning business, as I said, I've got a course called the $100 MBA, and that will take you through everything you need to know to have a good, solid foundation in business. Okay, so you can follow the links in the description. Thank you for listening. You guys are awesome as always, and I will see you on the next episode. Take care.